All right, big fella, what do you have on your mind?
Well, guys, I was tasked to go to run a piece of equipment today. Luckily, I lucked out and got stuck in a piece of equipment today down at the limb yard. We're doing a bunch of milling for new roads and asphalts and things, and I have had been tasked to sit at the limb yard and push up the loads of millings that were brought in today. And this is the first time in a long time that I have been able to listen to a podcast. And I just automatically went to like top the charts, and I selected a show that was kind of in my wheelhouse. Called Noble, and this show is it's a Waveland production and campsite production, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Long story short, this was probably one of the craziest things that I've ever heard of, and I don't know why. I mean, I do know why I haven't heard of it, because I was obviously only like in eighth or freshman or sophomore year whenever this stuff happened. But in this show, it was called Noble, and it was named after the town of Noble, Georgia. And in Noble, Georgia, there was a place there called the Tri-State Crematorium. Is that striking anything for you? You ever heard anything about this?
Nope.
So in 2002, it was discovered that nearly 340 bodies that had been consigned to the crematory for proper disposal.
That a boy.
Proper disposition.
Oh, there you go.
Had not been cremated. They were just there on the property, and it was founded by the dude that was filling their propane tank for the crematory.
It was founded, or they were found?
They were found. Yeah. I'm really struggling today. It was founded by a guy named Tommy Marsh in the mid 1970s. It was located in
Tommy Marsh sounds like I don't want to speak ill will of Tommy Marsh, but that sounds like a guy that would rob your grandmother.
Well, I don't know. Tommy Marsh and his brother and his
brother Billy Marsh?
No, it was Ray Marsh, and then his son, Ray's boy, Brent Marsh, was the one that.
Oh, so Brent, Tommy wasn't a bad guy.
No, Tommy just started it, and see, he did it. He did it right, and then Brent bought it from his old man in 1996, and that's when the tomfoolery started.
Okay.
So in 2002, this guy that was delivering propane, actually in 2001, the guy that was delivering propane seen it, made a report about it, and it kind of got swept under the rug. Like maybe they're just behind. You know what I mean? Maybe they're just kind of like waiting in line, you know what I mean, to go in. Just stay in your lane type thing. Like he's seen bodies, and they were just, well, I mean, it is a crematorium, let's not jump to conclusions here. And he's like,
so
but
like
they were
just out in the yard.
Yes, like they were just outside, like in the yard, like waiting to go into the building, and that guy thought, well, that's probably the most weird thing I've ever seen in my life as a propane delivery man.
Did they have him lined up?
But I'll stay in my lane. So then the guy goes back, I guess, on an annual fill.
You would think you'd be using a lot of propane if you're burning bodies.
Well, they weren't burning them.
They weren't. They said there again, they weren't burning them.
But that would be an oddity to somebody, right?
Well, I don't know.
The guy that called the first time.
Yeah, right. So they go back. The guy goes back the second year. And at this point, he had to go around the building and, was hooking up to the hose. And this Brent guy was outside and seen him looking at a dead body that was like sitting on a body board in the yard. And he said it appeared as if it was like made of wax. Like if you could have imagined in like the Georgia.
Probably the formaldehyde
in the Georgia,
preserves the body,
Georgia
but
summer,
the sun starts.
Like the skin, he said it just looked like wax melting, and the owner guy walked over to him, saw him looking at that body, and they're interviewing the dude on the podcast, and he was like telling this whole firsthand story, and he said I didn't say anything, I just walked back to the truck, waited for it to get full, unhooked my hose, and left. Never said a word to that guy, and he never said a word to me. Like, not, hey, how you doing? Like, hey, don't look at that. Like, it was the most awkward interaction he said he'd ever seen, had
That'd probably be a top 5 as you both discover a body laying there just melting in the Georgia sun.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
So come to find out, long story short, he calls his aunt who works at, the propane guy calls his aunt who works at a field office for the FBI.
Of course she does.
Of course she does. And tells her about all these findings. Well, she makes up this fraudulent story about how she was walking her dog along this creek that ran through this property and found a skull. So they call the police. The police go out there. Sure shit, they find a skull, and then the whole lid blows off. The GBI gets involved, and the FBI, and
GBI is the Georgia Bureau of Investigations.
Yeah. So and then basically their whole world comes tumbling down. And they had one of the guys that was a member of the GBI on the investigation on this podcast, and he said it's something that horror movies were wrote about. But he said it was. Like he said, they went into this one building, which was like a huge machine shed. They found 41 bodies in that machine shed. And then he said, like, the one guy was still in a cardboard receptacle that they would have gotten from their funeral home, like where the body was, presented to the crematorium in or delivered in. And he said when they took the lid off, it looked like he had white hair, all like it was mold. Like white furry mold growing all over his hair and face. It was very graphic descriptions. But
so what do you reckon they gave all the families?
So that was the biggest thing. That's the big things.
Dogs,
cement dust. That's exactly. You laugh, man, but that's what it was.
They wouldn't put old Uncle Danny out there in the lake.
A lot of people that have already dispersed their loved one's ashes
have to do it again.
No, they had no ground to stand on because they
had concrete steps in the lake.
Some bitch set up like a floating rock out there. But they had a task force formed for people that had received cremains from this crematorium to come back in and have them tested, and like a staggering percentage of them were not actual human cremains. And they also found that they call it like intermingling, or like
they would put some bodies together.
Like it would be like half of me and half of you in the same bucket.
Which half do you think of you made the bucket, Smoke?
Probably the dick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Well, if it was my dick, then we could all 4 fit in there. 3, 4 with a guy on the couch. You know what I meant? But I don't know, man. This is the wildest shit. I want to dig deeper into this, but it's a weekly podcast, and I was able to listen to up to about 6 episodes today because they were about 30 minutes apiece. But I want to. It's still going on. But I did a little research on the interwebs, and I think they kind of figured out maybe why he never gave an actual reason why he did it.
Didn't do it.
Huh?
Why he didn't do it.
Well, yeah, why he didn't burn him up. But then after doing some research on my own, they said whenever he was arrested and gone through his he was sentenced to 12 years for deception. There was theft by deception and
for the money they took.
Yeah, abuse of a corpse and all that stuff, because he said like he never committed murder.
Yeah, didn't kill him.
Because he really didn't commit that severe of a crime.
That was
his biggest crime. The theft is worse than the.
That was what the biggest
EPA could probably get involved.
Yeah, and they were
rainwater.
They were. That was a big
Could you
thing
imagine
too.
if that's how they would have got caught? So high level formaldehyde in the creek.
So that was what they were saying. Like the formaldehyde that was leaching into the ground. All of the whatevers are leaching into the ground.
Embalming chemicals.
The bodies that weren't embalmed and all this shit. Blah blah blah. Well, then he said, like, the lawyer that decided to represent this guy had started receiving just as many death threats as the dude did for representing him. And he said, well, I got to bring up the harsh truth here. Like, no one died. He never murdered anybody. Like as far as morality goes, I mean, yeah, he's
Yeah, he's not a great guy.
Yeah, he might be a little sketchy.
I wouldn't want him to watch the kids.
Sketchy at best, but he said, really, is
probably just waiting on LP prices to go down.
Just burn them all at once.
He was hoping to change an administration to start drilling back here in the United States.
So, but what I was saying was, whenever he was apprehended and then incarcerated, I guess they do like a general medical evaluation or whatever they do.
Yeah,
mercury levels through the roof
on this guy.
Yeah. So it was like they said from the fillings, the dental fillings, the Mad Hatters. So the same thing. You remember the podcast I talked about S-Town?
Yeah.
With McLemore, John B. McLemore. Same thing. He had Mad Hatters because he was doing the gold gilding, doing all that shit. And then this guy, same thing. It was I guess basically has so much exposure from the mercury from dental people that used to use mercury dental fillings, and he had worked in that crematorium so long as a kid, him and his dad both, and they went back and tested his dad, and his dad had abnormally high mercury levels as well.
So he wasn't some creeper like boning the dead people or
no,
something.
They said there was absolutely no signs of necrophilia. There was no signs of like
selling the parts.
No, like no corpses that had been messed with or cut up or anything.
Just wasn't good at his job.
Yeah, like he just.
Hell, I've known lots of people who shit at their job.
He just wasn't
going to spend 12 years in prison.
He just wasn't burning them. They had to bring a guy, an actual expert of this. It was so stupid. Like he said, like the actual furnace itself was called like an industrial power pack, LL1175000, or
somebody sells them. I'm sure.
Just very.
I bet that's a wild trade show.
Yeah,
real lively bunch we got here.
But he said that they didn't have anybody that was like an expert on crematoriums very close, so they had a guy from Nashville that was a funeral director that owned his own crematorium go down there and look at it. And he said, yeah, this thing is in such a state of disrepair that he said, I bet you this sumbitch ain't ran in months.
Right, cook a pizza.
That's what he said. There was still an actual corpse in the crematorium, like in the furnace when they got there.
Can you imagine getting that close to the finish line, not being able to get a job done?
He said that whenever the guy at the GBI said that they were going, I can't remember what they called this building, but he described it as like a machine shed, basically, because they poured their own vaults, too. They dug their own graves. It was like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And he rented tables and tents and chairs for funerals, too.
But they smelled a little funky.
But they said that they kept getting closer to this strong. He said it was the most sweetest, like you imagine like a dead deer that's all bloated up on the interstate. But, he said take that times 1,000.
That's not sweet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. Like that's the rotting decay of like it's very.
I wouldn't call it sweet.
It kind of gets you right in the jowls. Anyway, they kept getting closer and closer to this odor, and there was nothing there. Like they couldn't see it, just a big wall of vaults. Well, then come to find out that they started opening the lids to the vaults, and one of them was, he said there's probably 15 dead bodies in one vault.
My Lord.
With the lid on it. And they're just sitting in there festering up like an old stew or something,
Old crock pot.
But anyway, I don't know. I just absolutely mind blown that you didn't hear more about that, which I mean, maybe you did or maybe you didn't, but I feel like that would have been.
I'm kind of upset you maybe didn't listen to our podcast, Help the Old Numbers.
What do you mean? Today's Thursday.
We've done a ton of episodes.
What's to say I didn't listen to it yesterday?
Yeah, I know you didn't.
Yeah, because I make the podcast. Why do I listen to our podcast when
Dave
I make
technically
the podcast?
makes it. Dave technically.
It's a group effort.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, that's what I was thinking about.
Noble.
Really screwed up podcast that I stumbled on today.
Yeah, that'd probably make for a real uplifting experience there.